Hello everyone, my name's Khaled Serag. Today I'll be presenting our work, ZBCAN, a zero-byte CAN defense system. To start with the background, the control area network, or the CAN bus, is a network that is widely used in cyber-physical systems. While it's the de facto primary communication medium for automobiles, it is also used in medical equipment, drones, airplanes, and many other systems. It is a broadcast-based bus that is composed of a twisted and unshielded pair of wires. Electronic control units, or ECUs, are connected to the bus in parallel. Now, internally, an ECU is composed of a microcontroller running some vehicle control application that then connects to the bus using a CAN protocol controller and a transceiver. Messages here do not have a source or a destination address, but rather an identifier that specifies the message meaning. CAN is decentralized. This means there's no central bus arbiter that allows or prevents nodes from accessing the bus. Now, since it's decentralized, CAN defines a set of errors and error states to be followed by every node on the bus. This way, it resolves errors in a decentralized manner. So over the course of CAN's existence, several vulnerabilities have been discovered. I'm going to briefly talk about the most common CAN attacks, but I first want to talk about the threat model considered throughout this presentation. Our threat model is assumed to be an existing but remotely compromised ECU. The attacker can execute whatever code they want on the ECU, but will be limited by its hardware abilities. This means that it will connect to the bus through a CAN protocol controller and a transceiver. So under the aforementioned threat model, CAN has long suffered from the following exploits. The first is message injection attacks. The attacker here could randomly inject messages, replay old messages, or specifically impersonate the messages of another ECU. Another attack vector that targets the availability of the bus is flooding, where, as the name suggests, it floods the bus with high priority messages. This leads other ECUs with lower priority messages to not be able to access the bus and to eventually drop their messages. Another group of attacks is error handling attacks, whose building block is injecting deliberate collisions by sending another message with the same ID as a victim's message at the exact same time. Now, this technique could be used to stop the transmission of messages or to push the victim to specific error states and achieve various goals, such as disconnecting ECUs from the bus, identifying message sources, mapping the network, or evading detection by certain intrusion detection systems. Now, when it comes to defenses against these attacks, unfortunately, they generally fall into one of two categories, both of which cannot be widely adopted for reasons that we're about to discuss. The first is the crypto-based category, which heavily relies on cryptographic primitives, such as message authentication codes. Now, aside from the limited computation power of most ECUs, which prevents them from performing cryptographic operations on every outgoing as well as incoming message, the short length of CAN messages presents an almost insurmountable obstacle. Specifically, authentication data needs to be sent either within the message frame, which eats away valuable portions of an already short message, or they use extra authentication messages that are sent after data messages, which in turn increases the bus load and delays the consumption of data significantly. The second category is the intrusion detection category. Now, this category delegates all security operations to a trusted, powerful intrusion detection node, often with special hardware privileges, and this node's role is to monitor the bus and to detect infringements on it. While this approach is light on performance, it unfortunately does not offer enough security, since it often has high false positive rates and usually detects flows of attacks and not single attack messages. This means that the attack usually has to go on for a while before it could get detected. Now, these factors forbid these intrusion detection systems from translating their detection abilities into prevention, which renders the entire solution futile sometimes. For instance, what benefit could the system achieve by detecting the presence of a flooding attack if it cannot stop it? Now, speaking of flooding, I've only mentioned it as an example, but the truth is that almost all of the existing CAN defense systems ignore non-injection based attacks. This means that solutions addressing flooding or air handling attacks could be pretty much counted on one hand. So this brings us to our defense requirements. We need to consider all major CAN attacks, including injection, flooding, or air handling. We also need to detect both single message attacks as well as attack flows, and to be able to translate some of our detection abilities into prevention. Of course, for that to happen, we need to have a very low false positive rate. Otherwise, we could be stopping legitimate messages. Finally, we want our defense to consider CAN's nature, especially its performance, by trying not to use any message fields or to make heavy use of computationally expensive cryptographic operations. To address all of these requirements, we designed a defense system called Zero-Byte CAN, or ZBCAN. The reason why we called it that is that it uses no bytes, or 0 bytes, of the message fields to achieve these security goals. So to explain how ZBCAN works, I first need to talk about the inner frame space bits, or IFS. In CAN, if two message frames want to be transmitted back to back, they first need to wait for a minimum of 3-bit periods in between. This means that the second frame will wait for the first to conclude, count an amount of time equal to the transmission time of 3 bits, then start transmitting. We call these 3 bits the inner frame space bits, or IFS. Now, for schedulability related purposes, we notice that the vast majority of CAN systems have plenty of spaces in between their messages that far exceed the minimum requirement. Now, let us call the amount of time exceeding the minimum IFS between two frames the in-between, or IBN. Now, we explain the central idea of ZBCAN, the IBN. What if we make the IBN of each message a secret that proves the identity of the sender? Now, one might argue that it would still not prove their identity, since an attacker could just lay low on the bus, wait for one legitimate message to be transmitted, note down the IBN, then start injecting messages with that same IBN. However, notice that I said the IBN of each message and not each sender. This means that for each ECU, the messages will not be coming out having a single IBN, but a sequence of secret and non-repeating IBNs. This way, attackers cannot just replay the same IBN since it would be stale. What we're doing here is pretty much sending secrets and encoding them in time, as opposed to sending them within the message fields. So the two main components of ZBCAN are the agents and the officer. The agents are software libraries installed on every ECU whose role is to apply the IBN sequence upon outgoing messages. Notice that one agent does not share their sequence with any other agent. So this way, an agent cannot just mimic any other agents. They don't have the ability to do that. The officer is, on the other hand, is a trusted node, similar to what intrusion detection systems have. It knows all the secret IBN sequences of all the messages, and its role is to monitor the IBN value of every message on the bus. Notice that the officer has direct access to the bus through a GPIO port. This allows it to stop messages that are not following their sequence on the fly once they appear on the bus and before they're delivered to the receivers. So overall, this is how ZBCAN prevents attacks. First, error handling attacks. As mentioned before, all error handling attacks under a threat model share a common root cause, which is sending a message at the exact same time as the victim. With ZBCAN, not only will the officer detect the injected message due to its wrong IBN value, the entire simultaneous transmission won't take place, since for the attacker to transmit simultaneously, they need to know the exact IBN of the message. This both detects and prevents all error handling attacks, even without any active intervention from the officer. Now, when it comes to injection attacks, again, since the attacker does not know the correct IBN, the officer will automatically detect and prevent the message from being delivered, which is also the case with flooding attacks, by the way. However, in the case of flooding, one might argue that the attacker may still repeatedly or risk repeatedly injecting the same message, even if they know that it would be stopped by the officer, since that would still keep the bus busy. To prevent such suicidal attackers, the officer may opt to suspend the attacker temporarily using a technique called instant bus off that we discuss in the paper in detail. So now, since our solution depends on the manipulation of message timings in one way or another, we have to analyze its impact on the delay of the messages, especially high priority ones. We modeled the worst case response time, or the worst case delay, any message could experience in a ZBCAN enabled system, as shown here. Next, we also came up with a grouping and an IBN delegation criteria that puts messages into priority groups based on the deadline each message needs to be delivered within, and also based on the worst case response time it could experience under ZBCAN. Our IBN delegation criteria guarantees mathematically that every message will be delivered within its specified deadline. So we evaluated several performance and security aspects of ZBCAN on a test bed using real vehicles traffic and on a real vehicle as well. We first evaluated ZBCAN's scalability by testing it on a test bed with 20 ECUs, all of which running the agent code. For the officer, we used our Renesas RA6 M5 MCU. For the agents, on the other hand, we used Arduino Uno devices to show that the agent code could be installed even on resource-constrained ECUs. So in terms of the worst-case delays, no messages whatsoever violated their timing deadlines, even the high-priority ones, proving the accuracy of our time model. In terms of attack prevention, we achieved rates ranging between 93.5 and 99.5 based on the ZBCAN setting. That was in terms of attack prevention. In terms of attack detection, however, we've achieved a 100% attack detection rate and a 0% false positive rate for all types of injection attacks, and regardless of the ZBCAN setting. Now, we also evaluated error handling attacks. As shown in the table, ZBCAN prevented bus-off and error passive attacks at a 100% prevention rate. Finally, we evaluated its ability to prevent flooding attacks. For all settings, we achieved prevention rates approaching 100%. So in conclusion, we presented ZBCAN, a versatile CAN defense system that avoids using any message fields or making heavy use of computationally expensive operations. Instead, it uses inner frame spaces as a channel to encode secrets and thus protect against the most common CAN attacks, offering both detection and prevention abilities for single message attacks as well as attack flows. We modeled the worst case delays in a ZBCAN enabled system and offered an IBN delegation criteria that guarantees mathematically that all messages will meet their timing deadlines. Finally, we evaluated several performance, scalability, and security aspects of ZBCAN on a test bed and on a test vehicle and achieved excellent results. Thank you all very much, and I'm ready to take questions.